Can you first define what is depression versus sadness versus a bad day? Is there a definitive term, or is there a scale of depression?
I was afraid you were going to start off like that. Defining depression is like defining love. You know, I mean, it's really hard to do. As we were talking before we even started, right? The brain kind of conceptualizes things in metaphors and pictures and poems and work of art, right? Like these are things that really capture the, you know, when people talk about being depressed, right? Being alone. So, you know, I think one of the best definitions I've heard of depression is the helpless or hopeless feeling that the past is going to repeat itself. You know, wow. I mean, I think that really captures it. Of course, we can get into the kind of the diagnostic areas, and that's really easy too. You could just, you know, look up diagnostic criteria for depression. And if you have a constellation of symptoms for 2 weeks or longer, you know, then you've got, you know, you're leaning strongly towards depression, or might be clinically depressed. So
2 weeks.
2 weeks or
longer. That surprises me that something that short of time would be considered depression. Does depression have a life cycle, like acute, subacute, and chronic too? Yes,
there are, you know, criteria, or not criteria, kind of validators of mild, moderate, severe. And then there's different forms of depression, right? So you have the kind of acute, you know, major depressive disorder, you know, and then you've got long-term, you know, people that kind of cycle in and out of depression. It's more pervasive. But, you know, preparing for this podcast, you know, had to return to some of my studies, and it's just really interesting to, you know, I've been out of school for about 7-8 years now, and listening to newer podcasts, newer information on this stuff, reading new literature. It's like, you know, this is the most kind of like the worldwide illness, you know, it seems, right? I mean, it's got higher stats than, you know, so many things that, you know, are medically being paid attention to, like heart disease, cholesterol, you know, all this different stuff. So yes, there's a lot of different types of depression. There are some key factors that I think are important for people to pay attention to, right? So obviously low mood, you know, sadness, you know, it's kind of like a sadness on steroids, if you will, right? Because sadness is a normal part of the human condition, right? I mean, we want to feel sad. Sadness has a lot to do with love, right? When, you know, when a relationship has a fissure or we're working hard towards something and we don't get it, right? I mean, sadness is important, right? Is there information in sadness that allows us to pivot and shift? Well, when we can't pivot and shift, and that sadness kind of gets that momentum, you know, then our affect starts getting hit harder.